Hey, my name is Fan Fantasy and I cover tactical and immersive games like Gunner HEAT PC. In this video today, I want to help out those who are just getting started with Gunner HEAT PC. For many of you who are getting this game or who just got this game, you're probably wondering, how do I shoot, lase, or even begin? Well, this video is for you, and I hope by the end of this video that you'll be able to use some basic controls and to find your way into this light simulator tank game. For those who don't know what Gunner HEAT PC is, it is a tank light simulator that is currently set in the Cold War. This game primarily focuses on scenarios and mainly PvE objectives, which is kind of like Arma, and a mix of Steel Beast Pro but much more friendly to gamers. Before we get started, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this video and if you find it helpful, and to subscribe to help my small channel to grow and to stay up to date on my future content. So to get started, you will need to know some basic controls for your tanks. I highly recommend that you go on the firing range by going to the Proving Grounds section. You are free to try out other tanks and vehicles, and it's a good way to learn before going into the battle. First things first, the WASD keys are to move and control your tank. To control your turret, you right click and hold and move it around. To change your view and perspective, you press shift to change to the gunnery view or back to the commander's view. It is highly recommended that you use the gunnery view when you're about to fire any other vehicles. Another useful control is by pressing Q and open up a main menu of things, such as formations and command, which will be helpful in deploying tactics in the battlefield. And you can also control the fire control system, but you can also do that with certain keys. Another function that you can do on the Q menu is that you can toggle restock. What that means is that if you're out of ammunition, you can toggle restocking, which will bring out ammo from the reserves. You'll not be able to control your turn, but you can always untoggle it by clicking it again. Another helpful tip is that if you only want to restock, for example, saber rounds, you can always skip by re-clicking restock, which will stop it, and then re-click it again, which will move to the next ammo type that you need. Another useful formation is that you can press C to change your view when you're in the commander's seat, or you can change to third person. But for immersion's sake, I would highly recommend sticking with the gunnery or commander view. Pressing C in your gunnery view will open up the auxiliary sights, which are useful if your tank is damaged. When you are in your gunnery view, you can also change to the thermals by pressing T, but so far this only works for NATO tanks. If it's dark for some reason, you can turn on the reticle illumination by pressing I, which most vehicles in the game should have. You can also zoom in your view by using the mouse scroll wheel to do so. While in your tank, you can press F to change your main weapon to the coaxial machine gun or back to your main gun. While you're in a combat situation and you hear your tank commander calling out an enemy vehicle, pressing spacebar will move your gun to your target, and this also works for the Warsaw Pact too. To change your ammo type, you can either press 1 or 2 and sometimes up to 4 depending on the tank. And there are two types of rounds that you will need to know for Gunner HEAT PC or for most tank games. The first one is a sable round, also known as the armor-piercing discarding sable. These types of rounds are effective in penetrating main battle tanks. And secondly, there are heat rounds, which stand for high explosive anti-tank. Heat rounds are usually good against lighter vehicles like the BMP, BRDMs, and the M13s, and maybe even the Bradleys. It's always good to be mindful of the rounds that you're using, so make sure that you're using the correct rounds on the target. The next thing that you need to know is the fire control system. Each tank in this game does have a fire control system that you would need to be familiar with. Currently in this game, the Abrams, the M60A3, and the T-72s do have a laser rangefinder, which means you do not need to manually sight or range the enemy vehicles that I just mentioned. I would highly suggest you read the gunnery guide from the official Gunner HEAT PC website and have it on your phone or tablet next to you as you play, because it will be very helpful to know. To use the laser rangefinder, you would need to press E, but each tank has a system that is a little bit different. Firstly, starting with the Abrams, which I would say is probably the most user-friendly tank. You can use the thermals by pressing T to activate it, and you can use it both in day and night settings. To properly hit your target, you will need to aim by pointing the square to your target and then press E to lase your target, which you will see the meter change, and then you can fire at your target. Thankfully, with technology, the Abrams is capable of calculating and compensating ahead of moving targets. In other words, the Abrams is capable of leading your shots. To do this, you need to aim your crosshair by aiming it at the middle or the center mass. Press E to lase and steadily track your target. make sure your target is still tracked, and adjust your lase if you need to. Learning to lead your shots does take a bit of practice and familiarity, so I encourage you all to play around till you get a hang of it. Next is the M60A3 TTS, an older tank in the Cold War, but it's still capable of doing a lot of damage. In terms of the fire control system and the laser rangefinder, it was a complicated process, but Gunner HEAT PC has made this a lot more easier and simplified. To lase a target, you will need to line up the small dot on your crosshair on your target. Make sure to steadily aim for at least 1.5 seconds before you lase. The difference between the M60A3 and the Abrams is that it will not display the range info, but you can see the range info on your hood on the bottom left to see if it changed. The M60 did have a flaw in terms of its laser range finding system, and so in this game it is important to wait for at least 1.5 seconds before lasing a stationary target. Here's kind of an example of how it looks like when you don't hold for 1.5 seconds versus taking your time for 1.5 seconds and then lase and fire. Overall, the M60A3 is a capable tank, but it does take a bit of practice to slow down and to lase your target, and to be familiar with it in general. Going over to the Warsaw pack, the East German T72 M1 and the M variant as well. The T72 does have a laser range-finding system, and to use it you need to press E to lase, but the adjustment will take a bit of time, which you'll see the numbers on top move and rotating. To use the laser rangefinder, you will need to line up the red circle to your target and then wait till your tank sights are adjusted, and then move the tip to your target. Do note that the T72 does not have any lead compensation systems, and so the T72 is actually more accurate when it's stationary. To lead your targets, you will need to line up your target within the small tick marks either left or right of your target. Basically, you need to manually lead and estimate where your targets are going. If you find it very difficult to see or in a low light setting, you can turn on the reticle illumination by pressing I, and I would highly recommend you practice this on the range just to be familiar, as there is some learning curve to this tank. You can also try it out on the T72 sniper mission. Lastly, in the Warsaw pack, we got the T55 medium tank, which I would say is probably one of the harder tanks to control if you're not familiar with this game. This old beast can pack a punch if you use it well. This tank does not have a laser rangefinder, but instead, you must use the gun sight and landmarks to properly range. When you view the T55 sights, there are 5 types of ammunitions which use different range scales. So when you're switching from a heat to saber round, remember to look at the proper range scale. To control your range, you will need to use the page up or down, or you can use control mouse wheel up and mouse wheel down, which I find a lot more faster. This tank is best used when it's shooting stationary targets, and if you need to shoot moving targets, you will need to adjust accordingly to it. You can do so by using the tick marks to lead your targets. Overall, the T55 is a capable tank, but it does take a lot of practice and familiarity with the environment in this game. To conclude this section, the key to laser target is to press E, but each tank does have its own unique fire control system that you need to be aware of. There will be situations where your tank is hit and you will need to manually adjust your target. You can always check your range by looking at the bottom left of your hood to see if it's correct or not and go from there. Once again, I encourage you guys to check out and read the Gunner guide, as it will provide a lot of information and details on how to play these vehicles well. The purpose of this video is to really help you get started, and it does take a lot of practice and patience and overall just experience in this game. Tank formations. It's important to be aware of basic positioning depending on your scenario. Why I include it in this guide is because how you position your tanks may affect the outcome of your mission. For example, it is better to move in a wedge in an open field rather than a column, simply because if you're to engage an enemy down the range, you would rather have more tanks downrange to shoot down more targets. Depending on the mission and scenario, you can always play as a platoon commander, where you can control the formation of your tanks. The column formation is useful if you want your tanks to follow you down a road or a narrow path, Make sure to use the column if you want them to follow you, otherwise they might get stuck by a tree and that might be costly. Secondly, the most useful one is the wedge position. This formation is useful to help spread your tanks out in an open field so that your tanks don't get lased or sighted at the same range. A line formation is essentially where your tanks are parallel to you, and it's good for ambushes or conducting an assault, but it can expose your flank, which can be dangerous. You can also use the diamond formation for defensive positions. In short, I would highly recommend that you use the formation functions, and just to be aware of your situation and how you can deploy your tanks in a better position. This is just a beginner's guide to help you get started and to help you be aware of the mechanics of this game. I hope you find this helpful as you conquer the battlefield with your tank. Remember to look at the after action report. It is helpful in learning and just to know what happened after the battle. There's a lot of scenarios, all of which are replayable, and there's a lot of ways to go about these scenarios, which really makes this game a light, fun simulator to play. My best advice is to learn as much as you can and to have fun along the way if you're really interested in learning about tanks. For those who are already veterans of Gunner HEAT PC, please feel free to share your tips and advice for beginners who are just starting out in the comments below. That's it for this video. I hope that you find this very helpful, and make sure to enjoy this game. Please leave a like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to help my small channel grow and to stay up to date for more of my content. I'll see you guys on the next video and stay blessed.